Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And I'm Aaron McCrae, Senior Pastor at Hillside Community Church, here with my good friend and co-conspirator in ministry for a lot of years, Brian Wurzell. How's it going, Brian?
Good to be on the podcast.
It's good to have you back. It's been too long.
Well, I kind of got removed from the podcast at one point, and
I don't even know how that happened.
This has been my first invitation back. Video guy Jared replaced me, which is totally fine because it turns out he's a lot better than me as a co-host. So.
It sounds like Brian's been listening to the podcast since he can quote video guy Jared.
Just saying. I'm here for the podcast. Great content, guys.
Well, thank you. Video guy Jared's doing good stuff. So here's the deal. We're going to do a podcast today because of an announcement that you made here at our church a couple of weeks ago. And you and I have been talking about for some time that you're moving on. We'll get there in just a minute.
Breaking news.
First, the backstory of our relationship. So my family moved to Phoenix. Good gracious. I'm trying to now get years. 2008. And you had already been at Cornerstone, a church in Phoenix.
2002.
So you'd already been there 6 years.
Yeah.
We moved there. We served together. And then I moved out here in 2012 to Rancho Cucamonga, California, which turns out pretty much close to your hometown where you grew up.
Almost a stone's throw.
In Yucaipa.
Yeah.
And so we've been 10 years together here at Hillside.
Amazing.
I have grays to show.
Yeah.
Like.
And apparently I have a few as well. What the ministry will do to you, Pastor
I
A.
guess so. After ministry and COVID, this is what you look like.
That's all good. You're doing great, though. If I
making-
can get my fitness and my nutrition in line with you,
Yes.
then I'll be even better with my little bit of gray.
I'm doing so with fitness, not too hot with nutrition. So that's a whole other thing. So before we get to some of the details, let's get to this. You are leaving California. How could you?
I don't know.
Seriously?
Only God.
Okay, only God.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't heard, real quick, give an update. Give an update of what God's doing in your life, how he's been leading you through this season.
Yeah, well, the really short of it is that God's on the move in our story, and I just accepted a job a number of weeks ago with Passion City Church and the Passion Movement, which is based out of Atlanta, Georgia, as pastor of creative programming. And
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's as wild as that might sound to you. He's going where and why? He's leaving the promised land to head for the Southeast. Yeah. I'm going back where you belong,
You're getting to my roots.
Yeah.
Deep to the roots.
And really deep to our roots, because we have really deep roots with the Passion Movement. Both you and I, we've shared a lot of synergy and connection over how God has used passion in our stories through the years. And I had a first intersection with passion back in 2003 during my first year in full-time vocational ministry as a young adult. And at the time, passion was just a movement for young college students reaching 18 to 25-year-olds, kind of the college segment of people, really trying to help them catch a passion for the glory of God back to their campuses. And that's where I kind of became familiar with the movement.
And they're still full speed ahead.
Full speed ahead there. And then they
things.
have now 3 churches in the Atlanta metro area and a location in Washington, D.C. as well. So it'll be 4 locations. So I'll be kind of overseeing creative programming and the production team, working alongside those teams in a whole bunch of ways. And then working alongside Pastor Louis Giglio and the team there at Passion, which is honestly just probably as surprising to you as it is to me to kind of be doing a run of ministry next to a faith hero of ours. Yeah.
It was, as you were talking, I was like, that was 2002, because Holly was pregnant with our oldest, Olivia, that we went down to North Point because Passion was hosting, I think it was called Thirsty.
Yeah.
It's for college pastors. I
on.
was a college pastor. So Holly and I went, she was pregnant with our daughter, Olivia. And so we've been, as a family, and I've been as a person in ministry, just impacted by this ministry that you now get to go be a part of.
It's wild.
And so my story is 21 years.
Crazy.
That's unbelievable. Yeah. But what's the real story, Brian?
Well, the real
Why
story
are you really leaving?
Is that
that's what the listeners, the inquiring minds want to know. What's the real story here?
Some of you are just sneaking on this podcast for the scintillating news.
Like, where's the dirt?
Yeah. Well, It's has to do with Aaron's life and some of the things in Aaron's life.
Just don't even
primarily
joke.
That he's a Dodgers fan, and he never adopted the Angels.
That's true.
Even though I was Southern California born and raised, tried to indoctrinate him early. But Hillside's a tough crowd, man. And all these years we battled over the Angels at the Dodgers, and I just got to the place where enough was enough.
And you're fed up and you're leaving. Well, good luck with the Braves.
Yeah, thank you. My National League team, I probably will adopt them as my National League team. But
anybody but the Dodgers is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but to be really, really, really frank and really, really clear, Aaron, you're one of my dearest friends. We've been running together in ministry almost 14 years.
Crazy.
We have navigated pain, loss, struggle, cancer, infertility, building ministry, both through the first recession that we were in the middle of in 2008, and a really difficult time in your life and your story and your family's story, all the way to navigating a transition here at Hillside on the other side of Pastor Dave Burns, and what would that mean? And the statistics are pretty terrible for the successor.
Absolutely.
And then here we are 10 years later, by God's grace, continuing to charge forward with what God would have for us. And so there is no other story except for that, that God has clearly put an opportunity and a call that's so unique on our lives that it just feels impossible to say no to. And he continues to make a way and has made a way through each step of this conversation, all the way into including you in that dialogue, way before other people were let in. We just included a small group of really close friends, and you and Holly being one of those groups of people, just that, hey, we're considering this, and would you step into this and discern this with us and pray with us? Because this feels massive. And I know, and Pastor Louis said this to me too, it does feel massive, but it's really not if God's in it. And, but it does feel that way because we can't see the grand scope of God's great plan for our lives here on the earth.
And you weren't striving or aspiring to this.
I wasn't going anywhere. We love it here. We love California. We love our friends. We love our church. We love what God's doing in this area, this region. I have a huge, speaking of passion, heart for this state. It's my home state. My family's all here. Promises.
You're
my
not
wife.
running away from something.
No, there's nothing to run from. There's only something to run to, and it's what God's calling us into.
And then that is just such a beautiful picture of the invitation that God gives.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always make sense, and it doesn't always align with the plans and the purposes that we've had. But when God speaks, like, the call is for obedience.
Yeah.
And the call is going to have sacrifice attached to that obedience. And yet God's going to provide step by step. And it goes without saying, but I'll say it because maybe it wouldn't go without saying for some people. We're thrilled for you guys. We're so excited. We love the privilege that we'll get even this weekend to commission and pray over and bless and send you as a church. And part of that is because we believe in passion. We believe in what God's been doing that. But the most important part is because we believe in you and we believe what God is doing in you right now is a good thing. We affirm the call of God on your life. And so we get to wholeheartedly send you and Promise and the kids just with our blessing to say, we pray God just surprises you guys, uses this season in your life in radical ways. And I was privileged to be a part of the journey with you.
Yeah.
And as a staff, even we went through this article. I think my wife actually found it, but we felt it was so helpful to us. Mark Dever wrote an article. If you're thinking about leaving a church, now this isn't an article written for staff people. It's really written for somebody at a church. By the way, there's nothing wrong with leaving a church necessarily.
Right.
It needs to be done the right way, but like there's no Bible verse that says go to one church and stay at that church for the rest of your life until you die.
Yeah.
So sometimes seasons change. But we thought this article was interesting. We passed it out to our staff. Just before I get into the article, what were your thoughts on the article when you read it? We went through it.
Well, we've had this conversation over the years of things that certain organizations train you up on and other things that people don't train you up on, depending on where you work and what you do for work. There's a lot of things that either hit or they don't hit. And, it's so interesting in church world. There's a lot of unsaid or uncommunicated expectations this way or that way. And sometimes that can come from us as pastors and leaders. Like, what do you mean you're going somewhere? You never talked to us. It's like,
Absolutely.
I didn't know I was supposed to.
There's two sides in this.
Is there a path to that? Is there not? And I feel like, the same would be true of like email. We've joked over the years about how, in ministry, it's like, here's your computer, but developing systems and
start
training.
doing your email.
Yeah.
Like, how do I do this?
Are we doing zero inbox?
Yeah.
What does that mean? How do you do that? And I think for me, this article was just a beautiful reminder of how. Because at some point you're probably going to leave a church that you're a part of, and maybe a church that you've been a part of for a long time. Yep. But there's a great way. I think these give some great insights on how to do it well.
I totally agree. Let me go over. There's two parts. First of all, and you can Google "If You're Thinking About Leaving a Church" by Pastor Mark Dever. You can find this on your own. But two parts. Number one, before you decide to leave. And then secondly, if you go. So before you decide to leave, he gives 6 things. Number one, pray. And we would say, duh, but I mean, it's probably surprising how few people actually spend like devoted time to prayer. Yeah. But pray, lean into that big time. But 2, let your current pastor know about your thinking before you move to another church or make your decision to relocate to another city. Ask for counsel. Now, in bigger churches, this is a little bit hard because you may not know the pastor, but the point is, who has some spiritual influence in your life that you could talk to, you could invite? And here's the key, before you decide to leave. Get counsel before you decide to leave. 3, weigh your motives. Is your desire to leave because of sinful personal conflict or disappointment? Is it because of doctrinal reasons? Here's another thing. Are those doctrinal issues significant? Not every issue is an issue worth splitting over. And so I think that's great advice. 4, do everything within your power to reconcile any broken relationships. Everything within your power to reconcile relationships. Number 5, be sure to consider all the evidences of grace you've seen in the church's life, places where God's work is evident. If you cannot see any evidences of God's grace, you might want to examine your own heart once more. And then 6, be humble. Recognize you don't have all the facts and assess people and circumstances charitably. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. Of those 6, Brian, is there one that sticks out to you that you're like, oh, that's interesting. That's a great word for us.
Well, I would say weigh your motives.
Yeah.
We are emotional beings, whether we think we are or we're not. I hear people say, I'm not a really emotional person. It's like, oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. Now, maybe you're not in touch with your emotions, but you are wildly emotional. If you're at all human, you are emotional. And so weighing our motives and being able to sift those in good conscience, but in prayerful desire. I think the other 2 up above 3, really, to pray and to seek out counsel can help you in weighing your motives. And sometimes you need unbiased counsel from the outside to go, hey, am I off my rocker here? Can you help pray through this? And even for my situation, I'd have some outside unbiased counsel to go, hey, this is a huge moment in our lives to leave Hillside and to leave all that we love.
And you're responsible for a family and figuring all that out. Yeah, there's a lot at stake.
So will you pray? Will you also discern this? And what would you say I need to know before I would?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. So I would say weighing motives. What about you?
Yeah. I think for me, because of the season that I'm in, pray. But I wish he would have had more language behind that. But I think what he means, and I think what I read into that is, what's God saying? Because I think we're really good at trying to figure out what we think, or like you said, what we feel. Not as good at discerning what is God saying about this. Yeah. And a God release or a God invitation is way different than me walking away from or running away from. God brings invitations to, as he also releases us from. And I think the prayer is the key part of that. And I feel like the humility to just recognize you don't have all the facts and assess people and circumstances charitably. Being that I'm a pastor, not necessarily a congregant who's leaving, I just realized, like all of us, there's always 2 sides to a story. Sure. And like you said, a church always has responsibility to do a better job shepherding the flock. That's 1 Peter 5, I just preached on that. So that's why I said that.
Great message, Joe. Just a shameless plug. Go back and listen to that message.
Also, we as followers of Christ have responsibility to do this well and to seek wisdom and to seek discernment. And so I think that just be humble. Just recognize that none of us have it all figured out. And so we try to prayerfully follow where God's leading us. So that's all in a category he calls before you decide to leave. Then there's the if you go. There's 3 things. If you go, number 1, don't divide the body. Number 2, take the utmost care not to sow discontent, even among your closest friends. Remember, you don't want anything to hinder their growth in grace in this church. Deny any desire to gossip, sometimes referred to as venting or saying how you feel. And third, pray for and bless the congregation and its leadership. Look for ways of doing this practically. If there has been hurt, then forgive, even as you have been forgiving. So if you go, 3 things. Any of those that are sticking out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, division, Ephesians 4, when I think about just the strong call in that passage to how we preserve the body, we've got to make every effort towards unity. And that is how the world will know, John 17. That's how the world's going to know our love for Jesus and our Jesus through the way we fight towards unity. And they'll see that in us. So that's to sow discord and to be discontent and to want that for others, to create discontentment. It's easy because, again, we're emotional beings. And so something kicks us sideways.
Absolutely.
And
any of us.
And we want, it could be anybody, whether that's a staff person at a church or somebody that's been a part of a church body, but really fighting for unity and recognizing this is the bride of Christ and she's worth fighting for the best things. And even when things are hard and even when there's 2 sides to a story.
Absolutely. And there's no perfect church. There's no perfect people. None of us do it exactly right. I think that's the one that sticks out to me. Don't divide the body. But part of the reason why is because I have some friends who are newer to our church.
Sure.
And I know fairly well that a few of them, the different churches they've come from. And as I was teaching this and talking through this with our staff in a staff meeting, it just dawned on me. I have no earthly idea why they left their church. There's not been 1 ounce of gossip. There's not been 1 ounce of dissension. There's not been 1 word negatively twisted. There's not been a hint that would sort of pique my ears of curiosity. I have no earthly idea. And I thought, what a gift in this season that someone has left and now they're a part of a new church and I have no earthly idea why. I don't need to know the details. If there's ever a time that's appropriate, then they maybe would share that. But there's no desire to spread anything divisive whatsoever. And I thought, what a rare thing in these days that no word that would call into question anything has even been shared in a way that would cause concern. Yeah,
that's really, really, really beautiful, and it's hard to do.
It is.
Because there's always a part of a story we want to share that may not always be the most helpful thing to share. And so way to go, whoever those people
whoever
are.
they are, whoever you are, good job. Well, I just thought, when my wife found this article, like I said, I think that's how it happened. It was like, that's just helpful.
Yeah.
We need to talk about this kind of thing more and give guardrails and give some just direction and discernment for people to go through. And your situation is completely different. You're, really in a staff position, being called by God, invited into something new. But at the same point, like, I would just affirm, you're leaving so well. You've left a legacy of serving faithfully and above reproach, and you're leaving with encouraging words and blessing to people, and you're able to step into something new. I would say, from my perspective, with a clean heart and a pure conscience, and able to step into something without any roots of bitterness that you're leaving behind. That's right. And your family's set up for success in that new work that God wants to do in your life.
Yeah. Well, I've been so grateful to be able to have you in that process with us. And, you'd sent over to Promise and I after we met for the first time when I downloaded the news to you, which was a That's always a tough conversation. That time when you do, I think it's number 2, when you let your pastor know about you're thinking about.
Like, hey, there's one more thing we want to talk about.
Hey, man, can you go to lunch? Can we grab lunch?
Like I just felt a shift in the tone of the conversation.
Wanted to bring you in on a little update on our story. It's a tough conversation, especially when you're not trying to leave, or there's not a contentious nature to the leaving. It's a tough conversation because we love you guys, and I love being with you in this work. And it's going to be part of the loss for us to go realize a kingdom gain is losing key relationships of almost 15 years of working together. But you really gave us some insight and some wisdom on the other side of our meeting that we took and we considered and that we prayed through. You gave us some great encouragements about, hey, we can see, you can see it, but also a few things just to pray about, just to sift a little further. And that's the wisdom you only gain when you let somebody in to that process. But I also want to say there is no way I would be stepping into this opportunity and this role with passion without what God has allowed me to be a part of here at Hillside. And that's large in part, to you and to our leadership team here and to the teams that I've gotten to work with, both in worship and production and communications. I have learned so much in my 10 years here at Hillside that has prepared me for this new assignment. Who knew that God over these last 10 years, he's always preparing us for something, but I would have no idea. In fact, and we've talked about this, I have a long vision. It's a value of mine is that wherever you are, it's part of why I'm loyal. It's the second church I've worked in. Passion will be the third. And I have a long vision mindset that I think it allows me to stay even when it gets hard sometimes. It's not always been an easy season here. Sorry to tell you that, but it's not always been easy.
Thanks for the update. Breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news. Aaron's just finding that out too. But I think the staying power has been that I have a long vision for this place. I see the potential that God continues to have in front of Hillside. I think some of the best days that this church has ever seen are in front of it, not behind it. And I can't wait to see what God's going to do. And there's part of the grief for me is just, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get to be a part of the day-to-day of realizing what God's going to do into the future. But he's moving us into some new things based on a church that took a risk on me. Some invitations from you and some of our other leaders to step up into some high levels of leadership. And, some of my learning in high levels of leadership is there's an endowment of trust that you're given with information and knowledge about things that are going on in church life that are hard. We've carried some hard things with people in our tribe here and just some tough seasons. And I think on the other side of that, it has prepared me for this moment to go lead in the passion movement and to go take some of these key learnings and to go step into an amazing place that has also some need for what you guys have trained me up to go give. So I am forever indebted to you and to the people of Hillside. Thank you for the privilege of being one of your pastors. It really is my greatest joy.
Oh, it's been our privilege. And our prayers are with you. Our support is with you guys. We're going to miss you like crazy. But we are so for the Wurzells and what God is doing in your life. And thanks for sharing some of this story, some of this time with us. I know for people of Hillside, just to hear your voice and hear a little bit more of the details, it's just helpful as they process. But thank you so much, and nothing but blessings on you guys.
Thanks. Same right back at you. Love you and love all the people of Hillside as well. Love you guys so much. We'll be back because this is our West Coast home.
Absolutely.
So we love you, and thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit more about it.
Of course, absolutely. Thanks, Brian.
Yep.